And here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Amsterdam Talk Season 4, Episode 15. Season 4, Episode 15. Sorry that I've been gone so long, but after doing 14 straight shows, I had to take a break. On Wednesdays, it's a little difficult sometimes to do an actual 30 to 45-minute show every week. Certain things happen. Some guests show up, some guests don't show up. But again, tonight we are talking about vibes tonight, and I bring in brother Jason. You said Delgado,
Delgandio or
Del,
Delgandio.
Delgandio, brother Jason Delgandio. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, first, obviously, Rod, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And to all the viewers and future listeners, hello. Thank you for giving me your time. My name is Jason Delgandio. I'm a college professor at Temple University in Philadelphia. At Temple, my expertise is the theory and practice of social justice with a focus on activism and social movements. So, I basically study how human beings create social change. However, outside of Temple, my other
Mhm.
expertise is the vibe or vibes, which is why I'm here tonight. Right, I've been studying vibes for about 30 years, so I started thinking about vibes in my late teens, around 18 or 19 years old. I'm now
Mhm.
49. I turned 50 in September. Right, so it's been a while. Right,
Right.
uh, wrote my first paper about on the vibe in a college class on nonverbal communication. Then I went on to get my master's degree and my PhD, and I used my master's thesis and my doctoral dissertation to write about the vibe and I create my own philosophy of the vibe called bodily emanation. My latest project is called 20 Minute Vibe, or the website is 20minutevibe.com.
Mhm.
I'm basically offering up vibe related content for people who are intellectually curious. In other words, I don't expect other people to be scholars and academics, intellectuals like myself, right? But if you like to
Mhm.
have conversations, you like deep thoughts, then that's the site for you, right? It's all about the vibe. What is the vibe? How do we define it? How do we explain it, etc. So that's in a nutshell what I'm all about.
Okay, so you teach at Temple, and I can't even think of my professor in my master's program. He went to Temple.
Oh,
He
really?
grad. I mean, he left University of Baltimore and took a teaching job
Oh,
at Temple. He's a math. He does math. I can't remember his name. Little short guy. I can't remember
okay.
his name, but it'll come to me eventually. But anyway, okay, so you said been 20 years with the vibe. So how do you define and explain, and experience the vibes?
Sure. Well, first, some people might say, well, how do you study a vibe? It sounds like a strange topic, or you like some crazy hippie or some crazy new age guru. And I'm not really any of those things necessarily, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
support the new age spirituality, the wellness movement. I'm friends with a lot of hippies outside of when I'm doing podcasts. I might look like a hippie sometimes, go to music concerts, things like that. But for me, though, I approach the vibe as a site of intellectual investigation. Right? I want to know what it
Mhm.
is. How do we talk about it? So for your viewers here, I invite your viewers to think about this, right? How often do they use the word vibe or something similar to it? And how often they hear the word, right? So over the next week, take inventory, and I guarantee you will hear this word a lot more than you think, right? But then from there, though, think about that. It's like, well, when you use it or when other people use the word, how do they use it? Why do they use it? What are they trying
Mhm.
to express? What are they referring to, etc. Right? That's kind of where the world that I live in, right? The things I'm interested in, right? So now back to your question, though, how do I define it? The most basic way to define a vibe is the exchange of energy between you and other people. So again, the
Mhm.
exchange of energy between you and other people. Now, of course, the first question we might ask, though, is like, well, you're kind of just substituting one word for the other, vibe and energy. So the question is, what is this energy? So is it physical or is it metaphysical? Is
Right.
it material or immaterial? Is it spiritual or scientific? Or maybe it's none of these things, or maybe it's all these things at the same time. All right. And in
Mhm.
this moment, I don't want to posit a paradigm here. I'm going to ask your viewers to think about this for themselves, right? How do they think about the vibe? How do they define it? Why do they use it? And so on. But to back up here for a second, I some basic examples of when we might feel a vibe or use the word, right? So, for instance,
Mhm.
you're on a first date, right? And a lot of times you're looking for a certain kind of vibe on that first date. Now, of course, there are all
Mhm.
kinds of vibes, right? Romantic vibes, sexual vibes, platonic vibes, boring vibes, blasé vibes, so on and so on and so on. But you might describe that first date to your friend in terms of the vibe, right?
Mhm.
Or let's say you get into an argument with your best friend or a family member, and all of a sudden the vibe is off for a few minutes, for a few hours, maybe a few weeks, and so on, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe you're at a work meeting and you have a really intense work meeting. One of your colleagues turns to you and the vibe here, it's a bad vibe. It's all negative, right?
Right.
Or on the more extreme side, think about a musical concert. You're with 20,000 people. It's your favorite band or artist. You're all kind of dancing, getting down. You turn to your family and the vibe in here is lit, right?
Right.
Or think about sports. You're with 80,000 people, you're all fans cheering for your team, and you literally feel the electricity in that stadium. That's why
Right.
you go to the game, right? These are
Hmm.
all examples of when we might use the word vibe, right? So these are
Hmm.
all basic examples, right? And so from there, though, I invite, again, your viewers and future listeners here, like, why do they use it? How do they use it? When did they use it, right? And then from there, like, can you distinguish between different kinds of vibes? So in our
Right.
society, we say, oh, like, we want just good vibes only. But that's really not how the world works. There are
Right.
good vibes, bad vibes, and so on, right? And
Well, that
so,
seems to be what people use today. Everything is
right,
positive vibes and good.
right, right.
Okay.
Well, let's say more about that, right? So you obviously observed this yourself, right? And so it's really
Yeah.
not true. It's more than just good vibes. There's all kinds of vibes.
Correct.
Right. And so I ask you actually, so you're obviously a host of a podcast and whatnot, right? I
Hmm.
would assume you try to connect with your guests, try to get connect with your listeners, right? And try
Right.
to create some kind of vibe for people, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Try
so
to create one.
right. And then how do you think about the vibe? Right. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but like I'm sure you use the word at some point in your life, right? How do you think about the vibe?
Um, I try to really stay out pop culture with that word. With that word. So I kind of like. I'm a huge wrestling fan. So this is. I'm
Okay.
a huge wrestling fan. So when I went to WrestleMania in April and that last match with Cody and Roman, I wouldn't say I felt the vibe. I'm like, yo, the atmosphere was like electric. So I
Right.
kind
Right.
of try to stay away from those words that's used every day that I see on the internet, vibes, lit,
Right.
things that nature. But I know what it mean. But the
Right.
same
Right.
thing I just said, it was electrifying. Basically the same thing. It was
Right.
lit. It was, so um just I try to connect and feel the vibe, I guess, to see what's going on. I try to see what it is. But
Right.
again, what you said there's good vibes, there's bad vibes, there's type of vibes. So
Right. Right.
um it all depends on the atmosphere. I mean, a bad personal bad vibe if you go to a stadium with 20,000 people watching a football game, your team is losing. That's kind of a somber bad vibe, isn't
Right.
it?
Right.
But if they're winning, everybody's high fiving, having a good time.
Sure.
Well, the spirits then already bought you already having a good time because the spirits are in you. So the vibe is definitely, I guess that's how I would experience it.
Okay, that's yeah. All right, and so who you sports as an example there, right? I'm
Hmm.
assuming you're familiar with the phrase the 12th man, right? So in football, like you have 11 people on team, the 12th
Right.
man is the fans, right? And but
Hmm.
the same kind of thing happens in all sports, and it's the idea that we as fans can in some way influence the outcome of the game by being a
Correct.
good fan, by cheering for them, etc. Right? And I would say
Right.
part of that dynamic though is not just cheering, is not just the loud noise that we're making. That's part of it, but
Right.
literally the kind of vibe that we're generating as a collective base of fans,
Hmm.
trying to pump up our team, right? Give them positive encouragement, all those kinds of things. Now, of course, when your team's not doing well, you start booing them. That's the other side of that vibe, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Now,
And by you saying that you work at Temple and you're in Philadelphia, that's the quickest vibe in the world with Philadelphia fans.
oh yes, yeah, Philly fans, yeah, they yes. I
They're
don't want to say too
different.
much about that, but the answer is yes. Right,
They're
totally.
different. They're different. two
Uh,
minutes they love you, 2 minutes later they hate you.
Philadelphia's a great sports town. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, they either love you or they hate you, literally in the same game. It doesn't make a difference, right?
Right.
Right, totally, right. Now, you used the word atmosphere earlier, and so one way to think about the vibe is in terms of how do other societies, other cultures talk about vibes.
Correct.
Right? So I've been to Portugal a couple of times now. If you haven't been there, I definitely recommend. It's a great country, right? And over there, though, they will use the actual English translation vibes, right?
Hmm.
They also use the word waves, right? So like waves through the air, right?
Okay.
Then I have friends who live in Spain. They said that the word vibe is used over in Spain, right?
Hmm.
I know someone lives over in Germany, and they say like, well, she speaks English and German at the same time, and if they in that case they will use vibes, but it's more common to use something like atmosphere, like you were saying earlier.
Right.
But it means the same kind of thing. Right?
Correct.
Then I've seen photos from Japan. I think it
Hmm.
was a shirt in a store. It just says "Have good vibe." Right, so they use
Right.
the English word there, right? Which is to say, this isn't just American pop culture, but it's something that really does play itself out in most, if not all, societies in one way or another throughout the
Hmm.
world. I think is really interesting. Right? So in many ways, you would think about the vibe in terms of like learning a language,
Right.
right? So if I know a few words of Spanish, I can get by on a trip, right?
Hmm.
With the more words I know of Spanish, and I go to Spain or Mexico, whatever it is, I can have better conversations. So the question then becomes, how might we expand our vibe vocabulary in terms of the experience and our ability to articulate that for ourselves and for other people, right? And once you do that, though, you have a better ability to distinguish between certain kinds of vibes over here and certain kinds of vibes over there, if that makes
Hmm.
sense, right? It's almost like being a more tuned to your own vibe and the vibes of other people, how bodies interact, how do you read people, etc.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that, how you read people. So how do you tap in? How do you tap or feel other people's vibes or waves or atmosphere?
Right, 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 right. So that's a common question people ask me. It's strangely, it's a hard question for me to answer, only because for me it's second nature, right?
Hmm.
But having said that, though, it's literally my job to do this, right? So to break it down a few steps here. So one, try to become more aware of your body, just like where are you, how your body feels, how it moves through space, and things like that. Then number two, become more aware of your surrounding environment. Where are
Hmm.
you? Who are you with? What's happening in general vicinity, etc. And I say those two things because you're trying to become more aware of yourself and space around you as opposed to just being in your head all the time. Right? If you're in your head all the time with that psychological clutter, you're kind of cutting yourself off to the rest of the world. Right?
Hmm.
So be aware of your body, be aware of your environment. And the third step then would be to soften your perception or soften your ego, right?
Okay.
So again, trying to get out of your head a little bit, right? And kind of just loosen your senses up a little bit. And then from there, though, try to feel yourself into the interaction, feel yourself into the environment, right? Kind of trying to open yourself up to this thing we call the vibe.
Okay.
Does that
All
make
right.
sense?
So yeah, it makes a lot
Okay.
of sense. It,
Okay.
it definitely makes a lot of sense. So, as we stated earlier about good and bad vibes and other types of vibes, like how can you improve your own vibe?
Okay. So with that, first I want to say there's no magic pill here, right? Anytime you're doing like self work, it takes effort, right? It's not I can give you a diet pill and lose 30 pounds overnight, right?
Right.
Same thing with the vibe, right? So one, be self-aware. In other words, be aware of the kind of vibe you're giving off on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Then two, be self-reflective about that and ask yourself, like, is this the kind of vibe, kind of energy I want to give off on a daily basis and with other people, right? And if you come to the conclusion I want to change my vibe, like you're asking here, then it's an issue of setting your intention, right? Like, what kind
Hmm.
of vibe do I want to put out into the world? And then from there, experimenting with different kinds of vibes. It's almost like trying on a different pair of clothes and seeing what works for you, right? And in doing this, you're trying to read other people's responses to you. Are you getting a better response, a worse response, or a response you don't want, a response you do want, etc. But really, it's about experimenting with different kinds of vibes for yourself and seeing how people respond and react to you.
Okay. So, okay, now you used the analogy as like putting on clothes, to try on clothes. Now you have those individuals who just know their size and just go in stores and say, I'm not trying it on. So how do you decipher to say, hey, I really need you to try to change your tune, for your vibes or whatever, but that person's already like, I'm not changing because I know I wear a large shirt. I'm just going to get it and leave.
That's a great question, and there's all kinds of things you want to think about here. So one, what is your relationship to this person? Do they trust you? Do they trust that you're reading them right, etc.? But try to explain to them, like, look, the energy you're giving off, like you're bringing me down, you're negative, or you're a bully, like whatever the negative aspect is that you want them to change. Try to approach them in a way that's not going to make them defensive, right? Kind of soften up a
Mhm.
little bit, right? And from there, though, try to see the world through their eyes. Why are they giving off this kind of vibe? And maybe they're not aware of it, right?
Mhm.
So to use the clothes analogy here, just because someone wears clothes and likes clothes doesn't mean they look good in those clothes, right? And if you're telling your best friend, look, I appreciate your style, but I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't look good on you, right? That's an
Correct.
awkward conversation. It's the same thing with vibes. Like, look, I love you, I appreciate you, right? But the vibe you're giving off on a regular basis is kind of just, it's not working for me, right? That could be with your best friend, it could be a family member, romantic partner, but that's a tough conversation to have. You're asking
Well,
them to change part of who they are.
is I mean, it's really a tough question. I mean, tough conversation, but it's really not a tough conversation because if you and that person are truly, truly friends, I should be able to talk to you about that, and
I,
it should
I
be
agree.
nobody takes offense to it. I'd rather you tell me the truth than go around lying to me. Tell me that shirt does not look good, and so I can change it. If we go to an outing and you could pull me to the side, like, yo, you fucking up the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
atmosphere in
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Can you need to change your mood, or you might just have to go.
No, I agree. I agree with that. It's yes, yes, I agree with that. And that's a slightly different kind of example. So it's one thing if you're asking them to change their clothes that they wear every day, nonstop,
Right.
as opposed to like, well, we're going out tonight, going to the club or the bar, whatever it is. You're kind of messing up here. Can you change yourself a little bit? That's a little different, but I understand what you're saying. I do agree, right? If we're close friends, we should be able to have this kind of dialogue and this discussion about this, right? Especially someone in the vibe. Like if you're giving off a bad energy, you're bringing me down, you're bringing everyone else down, making me look bad, and so on. So yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, that could work. I mean, so I guess I could say you could use that form of a vibe. You could use that form of a vibe as a type of communication. Well, it is a communication because you
Yeah,
let
yeah,
them
yeah.
know that you turning the mood down in here.
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that up. So a lot of people think of the word vibe or the phenomena of the vibe kind of as a throwaway term, like a catchphrase, a pop phrase, things like that, which is fine. A lot of us use it that way all the time, right? But it is a form of communication, right? How do you communicate with your vibe, right?
Hmm.
So how do we read each other? And in reading each other, right? How does that establish our interaction? How does it influence the outcome of our conversation, right? Or if you, let's say, you walk into a grocery store, you walk into a bar, walk into a coffee shop, whatever it is, and you kind of get a sense of who's in there right away,
Hmm.
right? Where do you sit down? Who do you talk to? Who do you avoid talking to, right? Why do you go on this line rather than that line? And of course, there's all kinds of reasons why we do this, but I would argue the vibe is one factor in this kind of decision making process, right? And so, again, I invite your viewers to think about the vibe not just a catchphrase, but literally as a form of communication, right? And so, how will people read your energy? How will people read your vibe? And what do you want them to walk away with after they meet you? Right? And then set
Correct.
that intention for yourself, right? And then learn how to project and radiate the right vibe at the right time with the right people. If you can do that, that's helpful in your life, right? So, for instance, think of a job interview.
Hmm.
Well, hopefully you did your homework on this job before you get there, right? As much as you could. And when you walk into that job interview, you're trying to, radiate a certain kind of energy that's going to be inviting to your potential boss, right?
Right.
So there's a practical value in terms of learning about the vibe. It's not just philosophy and abstract thoughts, but how can we make this practical and use it in our everyday lives? And that's kind of what I'm about.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that. About as far, you just said about as like work and going places. I should
Right.
say,
Right.
because a question that people always say, so you can check the temperature or the vibe there, where somebody may say, well, who all going?
That's a great example, right?
Or who
So you
all
talk
over
about
there?
your friend, like your extended group of friends, right? Who's all
Right.
coming with us, stuff like
Who
that.
all coming? Who all over there? Who all gonna
Right.
be there?
Well, that's very insightful, actually, right? So each person gives off a vibe, right?
Hmm.
But then there's also collective vibes. So I talked about like the concert or the sporting event. That's a collective vibe. There's
Right.
also collective vibes though with your friends, right? And each person that comes into that group will affect the collective vibe, right?
Correct.
And then of course we all act slightly differently depending on who we're with. That's just kind of human nature, right?
Hmm.
So maybe this person over here is cool on a normal basis, but when that person gets with this other person, all of a sudden now it's just a mess, right?
Correct.
So talking about group dynamics here, right? And
Hmm.
how does the vibe factor into group dynamics? And so I
Right.
think I agree with you. Like the question is, well, who's all going, and do I want to be part of that group vibe?
Correct.
Right? So, yeah, no doubt about it. Right? Yeah.
Right, because people think it's just you're asking a question just to to decipher to be nosy who's coming. No, I need to know who's going to be there so I can find my temperature of
Right.
what type of bullshit I may have to deal
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you may have a person who might be a habitual line stepper. Might step
Yeah.
over some lines a lot of times, and you like, all right, I got to deal with this tonight, so let me prepare myself
Yeah.
for what type of night it is. Or just like myself, being a 21-year-old guy in college, we know we going to a party, and this is stupid. We used to try to outdrink each other, so it's just
Yeah.
like who's all going to be there, so
Right.
I know how much water I need to put in my system before I leave. So because things is going to be that, but you have, like you said, this, you have your personal friends and then you have your extended friends.
Right.
You just need to know who's there because some person may be a habitual line step and you're like, okay, I know I can let this person do this one or two times before like I
Right.
get mad. Or if you hung out with that person enough, you can be like, okay, this is going to happen. I just need to know when it's going to happen.
Hmm.
So I can either remove myself for a few seconds, or I can just sit back and say, all right, get myself together and allow this
Right.
to happen. But in those specific situations, how could you create a better vibe in that type of situation?
Sure. Well, in some ways, vibes speak louder than words. Not all the time, but sometimes, right? And again,
Mhm.
if you learn how to tap into the vibe and use the vibe to your advantage as a form of communication, as a way of knowing, and so on, then you can learn to adjust your own vibe, and in doing so, you can implicitly affect the vibes of other people, right?
Mhm.
So that's important to keep in mind, right? So how can you learn to adjust your vibe in a way that affects positively other people, right? So if some people are stepping out of line, things like that, sometimes you have to say something, or sometimes you just get off the right energy and it'll work for you. Right now, not all the time, right?
Right.
Some people that can't, they don't read vibes, they don't read the room at all, right?
Right.
And those are usually people that step out of line. So you're not reading the room here. Look around you. That's not what the party's all about, right?
Correct.
And sometimes then you just have to say something. There's no two ways about it.
Understandable. Now, me, because this was actually told to me yesterday, is just like I have this this face that just looks like it doesn't even be bothered half of the time. But again, that's just me. It's not, I mean, you can talk to me and bother me, but it's just like that's just my face. I don't walk around just smiling for no apparent reason. So
Right,
my
right,
face
right,
is just normal. So I'm guessing it'll be that when that question was said, well, when that statement was said, I should have just tried to figure it out, like to change my mood or whatever. But I had no mood. It was just that's just my face.
right.
I don't
Kind of
know
like
what you want me
an
to
even
do.
line, like an even keel, right? Like just not high, not low, just kind of in the middle.
Yeah, it's just in the middle. It's like you can talk to me. It's not like I'm just not this person who's just gonna be extra, I should say.
Right, 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 right.
Like
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
who I am. So
Right.
I
And
guess
there's
I'm
nothing
gonna
wrong with that. I mean, and that's another thing where, like, just like certain personalities don't mesh, certain vibes don't mesh, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like we're not built to like everybody in the world. It's not how human beings are built, right?
right.
And so y- not everyone needs to like me. I don't need to like everyone else. Or not saying not liking. It's like we don't need to get along with everyone, right? As long as it's peaceful, it's fine, right? As long as it's
Mhm.
cordial. But we don't need to be best friends with everybody.
Well, that's the key word, cordial. Like I'm
Right.
here, I'm not gonna mess anything up. I will
Mhm.
talk, but I'm not going to extra. I'm just gonna if I'm spoken to, I'll answer a question. I'm just not gonna
Right.
insert myself through a conversation. So that works for me. It sounds about right.
Right. And then with people who are extra, again, think about that, right? What kind of vibe do they give off? And there's like low extra and there's extra extra, right? And they bring with
Right.
them a certain kind of energy, a certain kind of vibe that some people like, but that's not for everyone, right?
Correct.
For myself speaking, I'm not trying to offend anyone. Like I don't mind extra people. I like they're usually fun to hang out with and whatnot. But if they're extra extra over the top, it wears on me a little. It's like draining to me.
Right.
It's too
But
much. It's too intense.
but there's one in every family.
Oh yeah,
So,
no doubt about that.
so
Yeah, yeah,
that's why you just have to embrace it. Like, hold on, I know John Doe gonna be there. He's extra, so let me just kind of let him get it out the way, and we go from there. And you
right,
just after being around that person for so long, you're just all right. This is just going to happen, and it's no harm, no foul in nobody. Kind
right,
of. I guess we can go back to your form of communication, the vibe. You been around this person so long, you basically like, I know this is going to happen, let me adjust myself to it. um First time you're not used to it, but
right.
maybe after the 10th time it's like, that's just him.
It's not worth getting into it about. Just let it go. Right,
Right, you pick your own battles. Every battle is not meant for an argument for you to stand on something.
right,
Nah, just let it go.
right.
But
Which is
go ahead.
insightful about the vibe, right? How do you when you're catching a bad vibe from someone or an extra vibe from someone, like you said, it could be annoying at first, but at some point they don't mean nothing by it, right? And so learning that vibe just kind of pass you by, like just don't acknowledge. Like it's like a ripple in the water that you just kind of let wash over you. Not a big deal. Mhm.
Yeah. So how do you shield yourself from those negative vibes?
Right. That's tough to do actually. It depends how intense the negativity is, right?
Mhm.
But each person has to find for themselves what works for them, like mentally, like what kind of metaphor in your mind you want to use, right? So you said the word shield, right? So
Hmm.
it could be a shield, it could be a suit of armor, it could be a rubber suit, right? But how do you protect yourself from these negative vibes? And the biggest thing is not internalizing them, right?
Hmm.
So let's say you're at a negative work meeting. Everyone's negative, everyone's pissed off, everyone's mad. It's just bad in there, right?
Hmm.
Ideally speaking, you could go into that meeting, observe what's going on around you, participate when necessary, but not absorb or internalize the negativity that's happening around you. But that's
Hmm.
a life skill, though. That's something you have to constantly work on to actually do and master, right?
Hmm.
Um, because each human being is affected by their environment. So if you're in a negative environment, that will affect you, but you can develop the ability to avoid doing that and stop doing that. But again, though, I invite your viewers, what works for them? Like what how do you envision it? Like what metaphor works for you to help you not internalize those vibes?
Well, when it comes to the viewers, I kind of to say with them, my vibe is I'll just ask them. My faithful listeners, I'll ask them like, "What you want me to talk about next week?" So, I feel like that's engaging them basically. Like, I mean, I know you don't run the show or you don't do anything with this podcast, but again, it's engaging you because you want me to talk about that. But again, those topics that you ask for, and that's on our motto, you never know what somebody's going through. So
Gotcha.
when them person sit and listen for this 30, 35 minutes, it's going to be like, oh, wow, I see it from somebody else perspective. And the people that come on as yourself and the other 89 people that been on, these are authentic stories.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
So nobody's lying to you to be
Right, right,
like,
right.
everybody's telling you, as far as from what you're speaking of vibes from people who've been through sobriety, porn addiction, prostitution addiction, all of that. They're telling you from their own eyes. So what you're going through, you're getting it from somebody because there's always somebody that you'll talk to and you're like, you don't know what I'm going through.
Right.
Nah, these people know what you're going through because they done been through it.
Hmm. Well,
So
on that note, though, so think about the word being authentic, right? Which I
mhm,
appreciate. Like in terms of myself, I pride myself on being authentic, genuine, honest, trustworthy, etc. Right? But it's instructive. Think about someone who's authentic
mhm,
and the kind of vibe they give off, right? That authentic vibe is often infectious, right? You meet that person who's authentic, right? You appreciate them being authentic, and it kind of
mhm,
rubs off on you. You can feel them, who they are as a person, right? And I think it's a positive. It's a, no pun intended, but it's a positive vibe, right? And I wish
right,
more people were more authentic in the world. If more of us were authentic, the world would be a better place, no doubt about that.
correct. So how I guess I could say, how might the phrase good vibes only be misleading?
Well, it's just not how human beings are built. Like we all want good vibes, and I guess if we could all wave our magic wands, yeah, nothing but good vibes all the time. That's not how human beings are built. That's not who we are as a
Right.
species, right? And so I think it's about opening yourself up and learning to appreciate the variety of vibes that exist in the world. Good vibes, bad vibes, chill vibes, extra vibes, ugly vibes, beautiful vibes, so on and so on and so on. All right. It's not just about good vibes, it's about all the kind of vibes, and really it's all kind of experiences that we have as human beings, right? Learning to appreciate them, even the negative ones, even the bad ones. And from those negative ones, that's where personal growth comes in, where we learn, where we develop as human beings, and so on.
Okay, so you using those vibes, the vibes can be misleading, but how can you use the vibes to become more charismatic?
Hmm, good question. Be more charismatic. That's really about knowing how to turn it on at the right time and how much do you turn it on, right? So some
Right.
people they try too hard to be charismatic and they come off fake and phony, right?
Right.
So it's about, I guess, to use a metaphor here. How do you learn to allow your inner light to shine in
Hmm.
the right way at the right time? Right, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I almost bust out in a song from Five Who Goes West. I just want the light to shine on me.
Well, like, I mean, we can think of all the great speakers throughout history, great leaders and stuff, things like that. And I mean, real leaders, not BS leaders, right?
Mhm.
And they have a certain charisma to them, which points to a certain kind of leadership. Again, authenticity. Even if you don't know them, there are certain trustful qualities about them. And that's all part of the charisma package.
Correct. Correct. Now, I use for that example that you just used why people follow you, and I always use these two people. Uh Rob Ford, ex-mayor of Toronto, and Marion Barry. They both were mayors of Washington D.C. and Toronto, and they were authentic with people. Yes, I do heroin. Yes, I do cocaine,
Oh, right,
and they
yes.
were both reelected for two
Mhm.
terms.
Right,
So when you, like you said, when you being authentic and you're not sitting up here being superficial and fake and phony. And when I sit up on this podium and talk to you and letting you know inside my world, like this is what I do. And
right.
people are like, wow, you really are down to earth. So they'll
Mhm.
get behind you again. As you said, the leaders of you can go with Gandhi, you can go to Malcolm X, you can go Martin
Right,
King, you can go whatever you want to go, these powerful
right,
speakers. People believed in them because they were authentic. And this is what they done,
mhm,
for people.
right. And going back to something I said earlier, authentic vibes are infectious, and that's kind of what you're just talking about right there. Like
Mhm.
it, like we, it's socially contagious, socially infectious, where we feel it, we see it, we want to support what's going on here, be part of that movement, be part of that person's world, right? And we feel
Mhm.
like we're taking in part of that vibe, and we're also vibing on that person, right? So how do we vibe together with good leaders, authentic leaders, etc., and how do we build them up with our supports? Just like when we're at a football game, 12th man on the field, same kind of thing.
Yeah, the 12th man on the field. Definitely, definitely, definitely. Well, here we go. We at the portion of the show where we go through unvibing date stories. It's called I Be Damn, and nobody gets hurt in these stories. We just tell a story, how we got it, and you can decipher it once you hear the story. So she writes, my soon to be ex husband is a monster and he took my girls from me. I'm a gambler and I owed some bad people more than $26,000. So I sold my husband's classic car to the highest bidder. The car sale wiped my debt clean. His great grandfather gave him that car. It appeared in two Hollywood movies. It was a full week before my husband noticed someone stole it out our garage. Ironically, I stopped the insurance payment last year and I've been pocketing the money. When my husband realized there was no insurance, he became a different man around me and his attitude hurt our marriage. I prayed and forgave myself for selling his car, but my gambling debts hurt me too. I've never had enough money and I currently owe $8,000 plus in new gambling debt. Instead of getting a third part-time job to help me, my husband filed for divorce and my teen girls went with him. This will be my first Mother's Day without my girls. He turned my girls against me. They blocked me from their socials and they never call. How do I reconnect with them?
Ooh, wee. Uh, well, man, I don't know how to respond to that. There's a lot going on there. I'm a college professor. I have a degree in communication studies. I'm not sure what to say about that. I, I guess the first thing is try to get your gambling problem under control. Like that seems to be the root here, right?
Right,
There's no judgment in me saying that. I'm not judging the person, but
right.
that seems to be the underlying issue here. And unless that happens, more bad vibes are going to happen to you. Like that's just going to happen. That's what's going to happen.
Hey, she sold a now she didn't say what type of car it was, but
Right.
this being in two movies and being a classic car and it sold for 26K to pay for
Right.
your gambling debt. If I'm him, I'm pissed. I'm doing the same exact
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It's hard to side with her in this situation.
Right. It's definitely hard to side with it. But when you do you do any like speaking? Because here's your website,
Thank you.
20minutevibe.com,
Appreciate
Facebook and IG, 20 Minute Vibe. Do you like do any speaking like on any of these socials? Just like a day you might just pick and say, hey, I'm gonna go live and speak. So if
I have
anybody just
not done
wanted to
any
reach you,
live stuff yet. No, I've not done any live stuff yet. I have videos and reels, things like that. I've not gone live that yet, though. My friends are telling me I should do it. I don't know, I'm kind of nervous about it. Sounds strange, but going, it's fine. I'm live, fine live now because it's your show. But if I have
Mhm.
to control everything, then I get nervous. I sound nervous vibes out there. So, but maybe in the future, though.
Got you. I understand. Well, again, thank you for coming on and
I
experience
appreciate it.
and sharing, the vibe with us. And that you did say other cultures, they all use this pop culture word.
Mhm.
You said wavy, vibes, lit,
Right, right,
all
right.
of us used across the world.
Right. Yeah, yeah, totally.
I
Well,
mean,
thank you, Rod. I appreciate it. Thank you to the viewers and listeners. I had a really good time. If you want to check out my stuff, there's all my stuff there. 20minutevibe.com.
All right. And we'll be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, same channel, 7 o'clock, with a divorce lawyer next week. I've had some people said, hey, you we're going through a divorce. I need some free legal advice. So I went and found a divorce lawyer that's going to help with some free legal advice and how much well, we already talked. This stuff is expensive. So it's going to give us some prices on that, just 30,000 just to get you in the courtroom, especially when it comes to money and children and assets and all of that. So I'll definitely see you next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m., same time with my divorce lawyer next week. Other than that, thank you for stopping by. Um, Check out 20minutevibe.com. Facebook and IG is the same thing at 20minutevibe.com. We'll see you next week. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
All right. End it. Yes, end the stream.